Hello and welcome. My name is Redboot. Welcome to this installment of a playthrough of Pendragon, The Fall of Roman Britain, which is the 8th in the counterinsurgency or coin series that is published by GMT Games. I want to give a special shout out to the designer of this particular installment of the coin series, Marc Gouyon-Rety, who I contacted on the Board Game Geek forums and asked for permission to make this video, which he graciously gave me, and hopefully I can do justice to the game. I should point out that Mark is not responsible for the content of this video. I also want to give a shout out to the designer of the coin series, Volko Runke, who has been involved, I think, actively in the development of this installment as well as many of the other installments, and has designed several of the other games, the coin games. And I mean, this is a brilliant series for depicting some of the more chaotic periods in history. I think originally it was used to depict counterinsurgency type of events in sort of third world countries in Cuba and Afghanistan and Vietnam, but has most recently in Liberty or Death, Falling Sky, and Pendragon been applied to more historical chaos, if you will, in other periods of history, and I think lends itself very well to that model. So the history of this period is very interesting, and I want to run through it very briefly. The invasion by the Romans of Britain occurred in Kent, which is referred to as Contiaki in this scenario, very close to Folkestone, a little south of Dover, in this Duro-Wernham city, back in the 1st century BC. So by the time this game takes place, the Romans have been involved in British culture and society and ruling Britain for several centuries. And ultimately, the Romans set up their main hub in what is now London, and then referred to as Londinium. And basically the Romans, over the next several centuries, spread out through a road network that they built of long, straight roads, which was typical for the period for the Romans. So going into the west, into what the game refers to as Atrebates, Durotriges, and Dunoii. They also fared north into some of the more fertile agricultural areas of the British Isles, into what is referred to in the game as Carnoi, Duboni, and Catullani. And in their journey north, settled in Corioltavi, Iceni, and Trinoantes. In the west, the Romans butted up against the Welsh tribes of the Silures and the Ordovices, or the Ordowices, I should say, but ultimately conquered them in a series of savage fights in the hills of Wales, in what the game refers to as Ordowices, Demetae, and Silures regions. And the Romans moved ever further north until finally they reached some of the areas of what is now Yorkshire, in Carwetii, Textawerde, Brigantes, Parisi, and the town of Eboracum. The lands to the north of that, Noantai and Wotzini, are depicted in this game as controlled nominally by the Britons. Although the Romans went that far north, a lot of those areas were contested in the 1st and 2nd centuries until Hadrian built his famous wall north of there, between what is now Scotland and the northern parts of Yorkshire. By the time of this game, in the 4th and 5th centuries, there were a lot of incursions being made from largely two sets of tribes. In the west, you have the Scotti, which are coming from, despite their name, which is the derivation of the word Scotland and Scottish peoples, but they're actually coming from Hibernia or Ireland. But they are invading to some extent through Scotland and Caledonia until the building of Hadrian's Wall. And then during this period, of course, Hadrian's Wall was not only occupied but pretty heavily fortified against incursions from what we refer to today as Scotland. But in those days, these were Irish Hibernians, tribes that were invading England, what is now England, and trying to cut out their own swath of territory. These tribes also invaded from what is referred to in the game as Oceanus Septentrionalis, which is the northeast coast of the British Isles. They avoided Hadrian's Wall and actually sailed around Scotland. In the east, the raiders came primarily from Europe and were referred to, although there were numerous tribes in Europe and what is was in the Middle Ages and Renaissance the Kingdom of Saxony. There were actually numerous tribes from Europe that came up and sailed overseas and really invaded the coast in what is referred to as the Oceanus Germanicus, which is the southeast coast of Britain, and the Oceanus Britannicus, which is basically the English Channel. And this basically brings us up to the history of this time, with the Saxons invading and raiding in the east and south, and the Scotti invading and raiding in the west and northwest. So that brings us to what we're going to be actually doing in this video. Now, for those of you who are familiar with the setup, you can probably see that I am setting up the first scenario, but I'm actually going to give a crack at the whole scenario, the campaign scenario, De Excidio Britanniae, because, well, why not? My mission is going to be to try to beat the bots. Now, I have to admit that I'm not a very experienced player. I have gone through the rules in quite a bit of detail. I've gone through the examples of play, and I've played through one round myself of the Barbarian Conspiracy, which is the first scenario. So I feel like I kind of know how to play, but I'm pretty sure that I'm going to be making some mistakes in this video, and hopefully, as I gain experience throughout the throughout this playthrough, you all will not be shy about correcting me or suggesting more optimal play, since I want to make sure that this is not only good for me in terms of learning the game a little bit better and learning how to play a little bit better, but more importantly, good for the viewers in learning how to play the game properly. Now, the other thing I want to make sure is clear is that my plan here is going to be to play the Britons against the barbarians. And the way that works in this game is that I play both factions until fragmentation occurs, if it occurs. And then at that point, I choose the faction, not that I want, but that has the lowest victory margin at that point. So I can't sort of trash the Dukes and then play the Dukes until the trash the Dukes and then play the Civitates until the end, or trash the Civitates and play the Dukes until the end. I have to sort of play them relatively evenly so that there's not a huge disparity between them when I actually end up having to choose between them at fragmentation and take the lowest. Now, one thing I want to get down before I finish the setup, I've tried to do the setup here while doing a brief introduction, is I think this game is going to be pretty challenging to shoot. It's a big board, for one. For another, there's a lot of sort of small activities that take place and sort of need filming. And I don't like to just have a static camera that hangs above the board while I play. I like to edit the game, the film, so that it makes a little bit more sense. And therefore, it's going to take a little bit more time for me. So, a couple of things. I figure I'm going to probably do about 6 or 7 cards per video, which comes out to about 13 videos. So I'm sort of including the introduction and then 12 gameplay videos. That's sort of the plan here. One of the decisions that I've made is that I'm not going to be running through the bot flowcharts in great detail. By the way, here are the cards. I made a little deck and discard pile. So there's 72 cards there. They're currently shuffled together. These are the pivotal event cards for each of the units, and these are the 72 cards divided into 6 epochs of 13 cards each, with the epoch cards shuffled into the final 4 cards, so I don't know exactly when the epoch card is coming up. But as I was saying, I'm not going to be running through the player flowcharts. I will determine off camera what each of the bot factions, that is to say the barbarians, are going to be doing. And then I'll probably, towards the beginning of the video, try to explain a little bit about how I got there. Maybe later in the video, as we get more experienced, I'll do that less. But I want to, for a couple of reasons. One, I think it adds to the continuity of the game a little bit. But more importantly, it'll give you an opportunity to correct me if I made any mistakes. And one last word before we get going here. I wanted to just say a word about Latin pronunciations. I'm going to try to get them right. I actually took 5 years of Latin in high school and middle school back in the day. I won't say how long ago, but it has a 7 as the third digit, and 8. 1979 through 1984, I guess it was. And so I kind of know the Latin pronunciations, the soft V's and the hard C's and so on and so forth. So I may make some mistakes from time to time, but I am going to try to pronounce them correctly, and I'm sure you'll let me know if I don't. So I think that's it. We're all set up and ready to go for the De Excidio Britanniae scenario. So when you next see me on the next video, we'll be ready to start, and we'll flip the first card. So please join me in this adventure into 4th and 5th century Britain. Thank you.